Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, and I'd like to wish you a Merry Christmas. And at Christmas, it's time for people to share pleasantries and often gather around the fire in the evening and tell a few stories. And I thought it would be appropriate to tell you a Christmas story that I've stumbled across in one of my lovely books. In fact, I hadn't realised I'd got it, but I found here an old copy of Further Tales of Olde Sussex by author Philip Mercer. And I believe this one was published in 1836 after his previous triumph in 2 years previously. And so rather than read it to you, I thought I'd tell you the story. So sit back on Christmas Day or whenever you're watching this and enjoy. It's called Lord Lugworth's Christmas Party. Lord Lugworth was the lord of the manor. He owned the town. He was a miser, though. He was a miserable man. He made lots of money and he made many of the people work. The story is set in sometime in the middle of the 18th century. Lord Lugworth loved his Christmas parties, however. He would lavish his parties on his friends. People from all out of town would come. These were the rich people with carriages and finery, and they would bring their wonderful wives and they would sit around the big table and enjoy a lavish party with wine, loads of different types of cold meats, some beer, some port, and all the things that you could ever wish for. But occasionally there would be a knock at the door and the poor from the village and the town would come and ask for some scraps, things that were going to be left behind. And Lord Lugworth had told his butler, his footman and his staff to send them packing. He wanted nothing more to do with them. And one year, when the party had finished and everyone was going home, Lord Lugworth's friend spoke to him privately in his conservatory. And he said to him one day, he said, "You know, Lord Lugworth, people are working on your estate. How are you finding them?" And Lord Lugworth said, "Well, it's all very well. They work reasonably hard and most of them are slackers. I try not to pay them too much, but they're all defecting, they're all disappearing." And his friend said, "Yes, that's right. They're all going to the towns, the bigger towns and the cities where there is more work." And Lord Lugworth couldn't quite understand this. And his friend said, "Well, you know, I know you don't want to pay them and you don't think they're worth that very much. Why don't you throw them a party? Make them feel wanted." And Lord Lugworth thought about this. He thought, throw them a party, but they're not worth a party. But then he thought about this a lot more and he thought, well, maybe if I throw them one party one day of the year, then maybe they will work harder for me. I won't have to pay them anymore. I won't have to give them anymore. I can make them work longer hours. And so Lord Lugworth started to plan his party. And he decided it would be a Christmas party, just as he had normally done with his lavish ones for his rich friends. He would give a party to all the poor in the town, and so that they would then honour him by working hard. And it was a great idea and he was very excited. The only thing was, he knew that if he was to have this party, that many people would see through and would understand why he's running this party. So he decided not to tell the people that this party was put on by him, but only reveal it after they had eaten his food. And so as Christmas came, Lord Lugworth told his staff that instead of having the party he normally had in his big, large banqueting hall at the Lord Manor's house, that he was actually going to go away for Christmas and have a party with his rich friends in London. And so he was going to take a whole load of food with him. And he instructed his staff, the cooks and all the other staff, to gather all the food together, to cook 20 gooses and 20 turkeys and pigs for hams and all the things they could possibly need. The beer, gather the beer and the wine and all these things, and put them into a series of big hampers so that he could then take them up to London. And his staff dutifully did all this. They cooked everything, they prepared everything. And then on Christmas Eve he said, "I do not need you. You can go for Christmas. Come back on Boxing Day, but I don't need you now. You can go." And he'd taken every scrap of food and put them into these hampers, giving his staff nothing, not even a Christmas box. Christmas Day came. He decided what he would do is hold this party in the town hall. But he didn't want anyone to know, of course, that he was holding the party. He wanted to tell them, as I said before, once they'd eaten his food. So he'd previously gone to the town clerk, and he said to the town clerk, he said, "We have a leaking roof here. It has never been fixed." The town clerk said, "Yes, my lord, I've told you many times about it, but, you know, you've been too busy to do anything about it." He said, "Don't worry. I will do something about it on Christmas Day. I have some builders who will come and fix the roof. Give me the key. I don't want anybody else here. You go and enjoy your Christmas, and I will make sure that the roof is fixed." And the clerk was overjoyed and gave him the key. Having got the key, on Christmas Day he could let himself in and set up his party on the trestle tables and lay it all out as his plan. But he didn't want anyone to spot him. So he had asked another friend of his from London to provide him with some theatricals. He had a fake beard and a wig, and he found he had in one of his tenants' farms that was abandoned an old farmer jacket, a jumper and trousers, and so he could disguise himself. And when he put all these things on, he looked in the mirror and he was astonished. He couldn't recognize himself at all. He looked like some tramp. It was perfect. He then found a horse, an old horse that was almost lame, that had never been used for a while, and no one would recognize this, a disused wagon. And he loaded all the stuff onto the wagon, and he hitched up the horse, and early on Christmas Day he came into town when no one was around and let himself into the town hall. But before he did that, he went to the church. He had to go and tell people somehow and invite them to this wonderful feast, this Christmas banquet. So he decided he would place a note on the church door so that as the townsfolk would go for their Christmas service, as they were dutifully bound, they would see this note and know there was this wonderful Christmas banquet taking place for them. And he did this. He hammered in the note and put it there and went to set up in the town hall. Well, earlier that morning, the vicar arrived ready to prepare for his sermon. And as he came to the church, he saw this note hammered on it and thought, this is very strange. A note offering a banquet? Who could possibly be offering a banquet in the town hall? He thought this very dubious because he knew the Lord was going up to London with his rich fancy friends. So something was amiss. This didn't seem to ring true. So he took the note off the door and folded it up and put it in his pocket to think about it. Meanwhile, at the town hall, Lord Lugworth had set up the trestle tables and he'd put out all the food, and it looked absolutely magnificent. In a further room, in a back room, he placed his normal clothes so that he could, after the banquet had happened, he could dress in these clothes, and then he could tell everybody that it was him, and they were then beholden to him for another year. This all looked absolutely good. There was so much food, in fact, that he couldn't help himself. He thought, I will take one goose. One goose. There's so much food they don't need all of this. I will take one goose with me. And why not? It was his food to begin with. The people started arriving at the church, and they were getting into the congregation, but they didn't see the notice because the vicar had taken it down. And the vicar was thinking about this note and thinking, well, what can it be? It must be charlatans. There must be con men. Why would anybody be having a big party like this? And he was convinced himself that this was the work of the devil, that nasty people were in town trying to entice people not to enjoy their Christmas day and be goodwill to everybody, but perhaps to fleece them in some way. And so he changed his sermon that he had already prepared, and as everybody sat down, he said to the congregation, he said, now look, I want you this Christmas to be out with your family, to be with your family and to take care of them, but do not venture around, for there are some nasty people, nefarious people, con men, vagabonds, people who will be out to get you on this joyous day, so be careful. And he sowed the seed that these people in the town must go home, stay with their families and look after them. And it all made perfect sense. And so they filtered out of the church at the end of the sermon and agreed, yes, we'll go home, anything, it's lovely to get home and be with our family on this Christmas day. We're not working, we're not having to do anything. And so off they went. Apart from two burly blokes, they'd been drinking a little bit early in the morning from little stone flagons that they had smuggled into the church. And they were burly blokes, and they thought to themselves, if there's any vagabonds and nasty people in our town, we'll root them out. And so they strode into the main market square, where they spied upon this dishevelled looking gentleman with a beard and a wig and a knackered old horse and a terrible looking wagon, with this big goose in his hand. And they thought to themselves, aye, aye. And they approached him and said, who are you? What are you doing with this? You're stealing our property. And this man said, no, don't be ridiculous. Of course I'm not stealing anything. And they said, yes, you are. Look at you, you dishevelled person. Give us the goose. They took the goose from him. They grabbed hold of this man, who started to say, you don't understand. Do you not know who I am? They said, of course we don't know who you are. You are a vagabond. Get out, get out. No, said the Lord, dressed up in his vagabond outfits. And he protested and told them who he was. You're not the Lord, don't be ridiculous. Our Lord of the manor doesn't look anything like you. What would he be doing, stealing a goose from poor people? You are some outcast, an outcast you will be. And so they got hold of him, they tied him up, they put him into the back of the wagon, and they turfed him into the countryside 3, 4, 5 miles away and threw him in a ditch, and then returned to town. At the church, the vicar had been preparing for his Eden song that evening, when the people would once again, after they dealt with their families, come back to church late at night. And he had prepared everything and got all the candles and everything, but there was this interim time, so he was going to go home to his family and see his friends. And he went and he closed the door of the church. And as he closed the door of the church, he saw the nail that had been banged in where the note had been posted. And he thought to himself, oh, yes, this note. The very strange doings that was. So he got the note back out of his pocket and opened it up. And he looked again and he thought, interesting. The paper was quite thick and very posh, very expensive, and the handwriting in a beautiful hand on a quill. And he started to think he recognised that handwriting. There were few people in the village who could write. And a cold feeling came over him. And he thought, oh, I wonder who it is then that is running this. Maybe I've made this wrong, got this wrong. And he went down into the village square and he looked at the town hall. All was dark. He went in through the door, which was open, and lighting a candle, he saw all this wonderful food laid out on these trestle tables, and realised that this was a feast for the people, but from whom he did not know, but it was a feast. And as he came out, 2 men came up and said, hello, vicar. You were right. There were terrible people in this town. We found one of them and we've ridden him out. Some scruffy old urchin of a man. "Oh," said the vicar. He said, "Well, never mind all that. You must go and rouse up all the townsfolk, for there is a feast. I've made a mistake. You must get them. We must have this feast. Somebody has laid it on for us and we will enjoy it." And these two men took one look inside and saw all the plentiful food, and they agreed immediately and ran, banging on people's doors and telling them that there was this amazing feast. And the townsfolk came out and they rallied round and they went into this wonderful town hall, and they sat and they drank and they ate and they made merry and they had a wonderful time. And it was fantastic. They told jokes and they laughed and they enjoyed themselves. And soon it was getting darker and darker, and they decided it was time to go home. So they went home and they roused themselves up the stairs and went to bed. It was about that sort of time a dishevelled looking figure in the lonely country roads managed to make his own way back to the large mansion house that he lived in. Lord Lugworth was livid and cold and depressed and hungry. And he slammed into the door and he called for his butler, but no reply came. And he called for his footman and no reply came. And he remembered that he had given them all the time off and didn't need them. "Curses," he said, throwing the fake beard onto the floor and pulling off the wig. He was hungry, so he stamped down to the kitchen. And of course, the kitchen was bare. He had piled every bit of food into those hampers, and he had put those hampers with the food into the village hall. And he sat down in his chair and he wept. And he hadn't an ounce of food that Christmas, and learned his lesson big. Well, that was Philip Mercer's story. I don't know whether that's true or not. You can make up your own mind, but I hope that you're having a lovely feast on Christmas and that you enjoy yourself. And I'll see you around when I'm exploring, now that the weather is getting a little bit better. And have a happy Christmas and a Merry New Year, and I'll see you soon. Thanks so much for watching. Take care. Don't forget to follow, like and subscribe. Become a patron, support what we do, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.